As Ben was talking about look at the birds of the air, I was drawn to this notebook which sits next to me on my desk, where I keep a record of the birds I see each day from my study, as I'm daydreaming when I should be paying attention to online meetings. So I feel like I do quite a lot of considering the birds. Um, so Ben has asked me to share some of my story and that of the Creation Care Scheme. So I thought I'd start by telling you a bit about myself. I'm a scientist by day with a PhD in clinical trials and a musician by night. I'm a proud Devonian, I have to admit, and a Plymouth Argyle fan. I love wildlife and am a marine mammal medic and a licensed dormouse surveyor. I'm a king kayaker, sailor, walker, wildlife gardener, and crafter. I moved to Cornwall a couple of years ago and I'm a member of St. Key Church. I've been a Christian all my life, but somehow grew up thinking that my love of nature and my interest in environmental issues was just a hobby that was important to me, but with little to do with my faith, like my interest in Plymouth Argyle. It took me a surprisingly long time to learn or to realize that caring for God's creation is an intrinsic part of discipleship, of living out those two great commandments of loving the Lord my God and loving my neighbour as myself. I grew up being aware of climate change as a big problem, but it was always talked about as a problem for future generations. As someone who loves nature and is passionate about social justice, I went on marches for climate justice, but I think it only really struck me how big a problem it is for our brothers and sisters around the world in the last 12 years or so. In my day job, I work on clinical trials, including ones on HIV and tuberculosis treatment, taking place in East and Southern Africa. I remember on one trip asking a colleague who was a Zimbabwean doctor whether he was concerned about the impact that climate change would have on Zimbabwe in the future. And he told me really clearly that it wasn't just about the future. They were already experiencing the reality of climate breakdown. And since then, every time I visited Zimbabwe or Uganda or Malawi or Zambia, the effects of the climate emergency have been increasingly obvious. The conversations I have aren't with eco activists, but with my colleagues and the people I meet as I go about my work. So I work on trials looking at the best treatments for children living with HIV. But I've been in meetings where research nurses have told me that the children on the trial are struggling to take their tablets, some of which are meant to be taken with food, because there's no food because of droughts. In other studies, people have struggled to get to their clinic appointments because roads and bridges have been washed away in floods. The work I do in health, which I believe is good, it's worthless unless we also tackle climate breakdown. Our brothers and sisters in Christ around the world are already living the reality of catastrophic climate breakdown. So I came back from these trips just being increasingly aware that I needed to do something. But when I came back to the UK, it was still being framed as a distant problem for future generations. Back in 2016, when I started on this journey of trying to engage my church around climate change and the environment, I'd been a member of my church, St Paul's Dorking, for 7 years. And in all that time, I can't remember hearing a single sermon about caring for creation. It just wasn't on our agenda. It wasn't something we prayed about. It wasn't something we talked about. So that's when I really felt called to try and take action to speak out on behalf of those already affected in my church, or to my church. And it did take a while and quite a lot of work, frustration, and disappointment for me before we started to make progress. And maybe that's something which some of you are also experiencing. I think the low point for me came in the autumn of 2016. As part of the Climate Coalition's Week of Action, I organised a nature walk at a local National Trust estate, guided by one of the rangers, and invited our MP and people from the constituency to come and show our MP that we cared about climate change. I advertised the event at my church and various other churches, as well as on the Climate Coalition's website and elsewhere. And apart from my husband and myself, no one else from my church came. And I was bitterly disappointed and discouraged. By spring 2017, I'd picked myself up enough to start work on the Eco Church survey along with someone else from church. And by July, we'd gathered the data and sent our report and recommendations to a PCC. And just asking the questions in the survey led to changes being made. People thought, oh, we don't do that, but we could easily do that. And people changed even without us asking them to, in some of the kind of small, easier wins. So by September, we were ready to apply for a bronze award. I think one of the key things we did early on was to focus on teaching around how caring for creation is an integral part of Christian discipleship. And we did this through Sunday services, but also a series of small group Bible studies I wrote called Creation Matters. And after that, when people started to get that this wasn't some hobby, some pastime, this was part of living out the gospel, uh, things started to change pretty quickly. And things which I thought would take ages or would be real battles just were agreed really quickly because people were starting to get it. And by late 2018, we received our Silver Eco Church Award, and we were the first church in the Diocese of Guildford to achieve this. And I think our vicar at the time was quite a competitive person. So having that as an incentive was quite a good motivation to get her to agree to some of these things. So that was good. But talking to our vicar, so Reverend Ruth Bushego, who's now Bishop of Horsham, we'd got to silver, but we were actually we could have a lot more impact if we could get households who are part of St. Paul's to start doing this in their own lives, as well as just making corporate decisions. Okay, the church's energy supplier is going to be green, or the church is going to buy fairly traded coffee, or the church is going to do this. If we could get all the households who are part of the church to take action, that could be a really big impact. And whilst we ticked the boxes on the Eco Church survey, we were encouraging people to do things. We felt that actually kind of getting started on it can be quite overwhelming for people. There seems to be so much we need to learn about changes we need to make. And there's so much greenwashing and misinformation out there. It can be hard to know where to start. And there are some things that maybe people haven't ever considered before, which could have a really big impact, like the environmental impact of which bank we choose to use. And so we felt that the Eco Church survey had been a really useful tool for helping our church to identify the things that we could change to better care for creation, but there didn't seem to be an equivalent for households. There were carbon footprint tools which would tell you how much carbon you were producing by your energy use and in your travel, but there wasn't anything which kind of took a holistic view and thought not just about carbon, but also about wildlife biodiversity and other forms of pollution and waste. So in the summer of 2019, I designed and piloted the Creation Care Scheme, which was meant to be the household equivalent of Eco Church for households within St. Paul's, with bronze, silver, and gold awards, because we felt that the awards were a good kind of motivational tool, and it helped certainly with Eco Church concentrate minds and so we built it around a questionnaire. And at the time, it was based on an Excel spreadsheet. And many people aren't keen on Excel, but it does have the ability to put in quite complex formula, which we found we needed. And so it was a tool which wasn't particularly easy to use, but it existed, and we piloted it in the church with I think we had a dozen households who were part of the pilot to make sure that it kind of worked for different scenarios, whether you're living by yourself or in shared accommodation or as a family. And we adjusted it based on that. And we launched a scheme to the whole church in the autumn. And to my surprise, after we launched the scheme to the whole church, I received an email out of the blue from the church treasurer saying an anonymous member of the congregation had made a large donation to fund turning the spreadsheet into an easy to use website that could be available to anyone, not just those at St. Paul's. So I spent 2020 working with web developers to do just that. So now's probably a good time to show you the website if I can share my screen. So hopefully you can see the website now. All good. I'm seeing nods. This is good. So the website address is creationcare.org.uk. And to create an account on it, you go to the households page and then fill in this box on the right here, register an account. So you just need an email address and a password, and tick the box and click sign up. Once you've done that, you can log in. So use the box on the left, and you get taken to this page where you can put in your household name and how many people are in it. So Eco Church is based around 5 areas. For Creation Care, we identified 7 areas we thought were important. So like Eco Church, you'll see lots of similarities. We've got worship and prayer. Then we've got home, garden, and if you don't have a garden, there's a box you can tick to say you don't have a garden. Then travel, food, possessions, and community and global engagement. So there's a couple of extra areas, food and travel, but the other areas are very similar to Eco Church. So when you start, you can just click on one of these areas, and it will take you to the questionnaire. And most of the questions are drop-down boxes that you complete. Some of them you might need to enter a number, and you work your way through the questions for that area. And when you've done that, click save at the bottom, and you can see in that area how you're doing, what your score is. And it will take you back to this, and you can see, okay, for travel in that area, we're currently at silver. Another feature which we introduced fairly recently was the ability to pin questions, so to create a to-do list, because there are lots of questions in this scheme, and some of them you might be satisfied. I don't want to make any changes there. I'm happy with that. But some of them might say, actually, I need to come back to that. I need to make changes, or I need to find out the answer. And so if you decide, actually, yeah, I do want to offset for my private vehicle travel, I need to do that, I can just click on that little pin icon there and then save it, and then it will get added to my to-do list. So we can see our to-do list by clicking there. And so we can look at the things which we've pinned that we want to come back to. And then when we've made a change, say that we want to say, I've improved, I now pray about local or national environmental issues more often, so I want to change my answer. Click on that button, it will take me to the question, and I can change my answer there and say that. So the idea is it's not something you do as a one-off. Hopefully it's designed to encourage people to identify actions they can take. And hopefully it's a tool they will use over a period of time, identify things they want to change, get ideas for further actions, how to increase their scores in the different areas, and come back to. So as well as the questionnaire, and sorry, at the bottom you can see your award level overall. And like Eco Church, you need to get to at least bronze level in all the areas to achieve a bronze award, at least silver in all the areas to achieve a silver, and at least gold, well, obviously gold in all the areas to achieve that. But we've also got commended and highly commended levels. So for example, in this test account, we can see that they're at least bronze in all the areas, but in some of the, in quite a few of the other areas, they're silver or gold. And so they've been commended because they've achieved at least silver level in at least 5 areas. And if you achieve at least gold level in at least 5 areas, you get highly commended in addition to your level, to recognise that maybe sometimes there are people whose circumstances mean they can't necessarily make changes in one area, but they're doing really well in others. So just to encourage people with that. As well as the questionnaire, we've got some resources, links to further information or tools that might inspire you or provide useful information as you work through it. So that's in the resources section. And we've also got a frequently asked questions section, which provides information about the scheme, and it has some kind of step-by-step videos for different features of the scheme, which might be useful if I'm going too fast and you need to a little bit of a reminder of how it works afterwards. So those are useful things to check through if you have any questions about the scheme once you've done it. So I'm going to stop sharing for a little bit. So the scheme has lots of questions to think about, and it can be daunting. It's designed to help households work out what their next steps are in caring for God's creation, whether they're completely new to this or have been trying to live sustainably for years. Some changes may be hard or even impossible for us at the moment. As a keen walker and a fan of Plymouth Argyle Football Club, whose nickname is the Pilgrims, there's a line from the baptism liturgy that I particularly like, where it describes the church as Christ's pilgrim people. And I think this is a helpful way of understanding what it's like to live as a disciple of Christ. When we give our lives to Jesus, we don't instantly become perfect, but we begin on a journey, starting from wherever we happen to be, to become more like Christ. And rather than be daunted at how far we have to go, we should instead get on with taking the next step and then the next. So I think if we feel overwhelmed by the scale of the challenge of responding to climate breakdown and species loss, then focusing on taking the next step and then the one after and so on, as we kind of work towards that goal, is a helpful approach. So the creation care scheme is designed for individual households, but we don't have to be on this pilgrimage alone. Hebrews tells us, let us consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds. Churches can be part of this through encouraging member households to take part. So if you have home groups, it can work well to do Bible studies on caring for creation and then encourage members to fill in the questionnaire and share what steps they're going to take next as part of the small group and encourage each other that way. Another way that churches can encourage each other is to celebrate successes. That can be really inspiring. So you might want to give out awards during services. So we've got certificates that you can get online, but also you could print out and give them out during services. At St. Paul's, we got little laser cut wooden awards. We had an acorn, an oak leaf, and an oak tree that painted bronze, silver, and gold for the different awards levels, just as a little token award to give to people. And that helps encourage others as well to take action. Or you could even get your Sunday school or youth groups involved in making or decorating awards to give out. Another thing which we found quite effective is having people who've taken part in this scheme share some of the changes they've made during a service. And that can be really encouraging to hear what people are doing. And there's good evidence that talking about the changes we're making to take action on climate breakdown encourages others to make changes too. So, for example, people who know people who've given up flying because of climate change are likely to fly less as well as a result of that. If we see people like us making changes, we know it's possible. And so having that sharing is really encouraging. And so that's why, as part of the creation care scheme, churches can register. And if their church is registered, then individuals can link their accounts to their church. So when you register your church, you nominate a contact person who will get alerts and a dashboard where they can see which households have linked their account to the church and what award level they've achieved. The nominated contacts also receive a PowerPoint presentation they can use to help promote the scheme at their church, and printable certificates they can use if they want to give out certificates. And when a household linked to a church achieves an award, the nominated contact for that church will get an email and be able to see the award level on their church dashboard. So registering a church with the scheme is simple. So I'm just going to share my screen again to show you how to do that. So at the top here, you click on Register Church, and then there's a little bit of information there, and you just fill in this form. So it needs your name, your email address, the name of the church, the town, and the postcode. And then you click Register. And it maybe takes a day or two because this is something we have to create manually for churches. And there's a little team of 3 of us volunteers who check the inbox and create those and then get back in touch with people. But that's how simple it is to sign up your church to the scheme. So that's what I wanted to tell you about creation care. And then I wondered whether it might be helpful just to kind of share some of what I've learnt from this process, because I know that you're all working in your churches, trying to encourage others to care for God's wonderful creation. So I've learnt several lessons. I think in the early days in 2016 and 17, when it was discouraging, I learnt not to judge my success by human standards, but by whether I'd faithfully done what the Lord was asking me to the best of my abilities. And I found at that time it quite helpful to look at the example of the Old Testament prophets, who were often persistent even when people weren't listening to them, and to just know that God wasn't judging me on my success or failure, how many people turned up to the event, but that I was doing what he wanted me to. So I think that was quite important for me personally. I've seen how when people understand that caring for creation is part of discipleship, big changes can be much quicker than I expected. One of the changes I was expecting to be a real battle was we used disposable coffee cups at the time. And I thought that was going to be a real pain because somebody would have to wash them up if we moved to mugs. And nobody's going to want to do that. It's hard enough to find volunteers for the tea and coffee rota anyway. How would we do this? So me and my husband just started taking reusable mugs to church, and our cool curate at the time also started taking a reusable mug to church at time. And you could just see more and more people taking reusable mugs, just seeing that other people were doing it. We didn't have a notice at first. This wasn't something which was said from the front or put in the church email. People just saw other people doing it and followed. And it was around the time of increased awareness of plastic pollution. I think it was one of the David Attenborough documentaries. But then eventually the coffee teams just started not using the disposable mugs, but putting out ceramic mugs and washing them up, and doing that voluntarily without it being a central decision or a big battle that had to be agreed by the PCC. So that's just one example of how change doesn't always have to be as hard as I sometimes felt it might be. I've also experienced how when I'm tired or discouraged, spending time enjoying God's wonderful creation can refresh and inspire me. I think the creation care scheme in particular has been a real example of the Lord's provision. So he provided the initial funding for the scheme. I still don't know who the anonymous donor was. And he's provided subsequent funding without me having to do huge amounts of work. My job was just to do that next step that he set in front of me. And he's provided me opportunities to promote the scheme. So Songs of Praise in January. This week I did an interview with UCB Christian radio station. These are all things which God has made happen. I've just kind of been the person standing there and doing what I was told. And it's kind of felt a bit like the loaves and the fishes. So I've offered my loaves and fishes, developing what I thought was a spreadsheet just for St. Paul's Dorking. And God has multiplied that. So now more than 200 churches and more than 2,000 households are using that. And that wasn't my plan. That wasn't me doing that. That was God multiplying what I offered. I know that sometimes being a creation care champion at church can be lonely and discouraging and frustrating. But I believe that if we're faithful to this calling that God has given us, he will use us and he will multiply our loaves and fishes in ways we don't expect. Through our words and actions, we can inspire others to make changes to better care for God's wonderful world. And I'd like to end by thanking you for all that you're doing in your churches on this. Thank you.
So I confess, I've heard Annabelle speak about this before, but I will never tire of it. How often do you get to sit in a space with someone who actually did the thing that they thought they might do? How often do you actually get to hear someone say, actually, I never thought it was going to go here, but God did? I gave my fish, he let it work. And it is, I love this. And I've just, there you go. Here is, I've brought up my little screenshot for you. I'm currently running at, what am I running at? Oh, I'm doing all right, I'm silver highly commended.
Oh, so close, Ben, so
So
close.
close. I know, but there are some bits I just can't deal with, like my car at the moment. But anyway, um, I urge you to log in and use this tool. And I urge you to be evangelists for it and tell all of your community and churches about this tool, because it brought us, we as a family, my wife and son and I, we come back to this regularly. And my son interrogates us over whether we bought anything in the supermarket that was imported. So, it's changed actually our awareness of how we behave and what we do. And I know we've shown you things like World Wildlife Fund's personal carbon calculator before, but this is so much more complete and so much more engaging. And if I was really honest, I wish Eco Church was a little bit more like this as an interface. But there we go. What are we going to do now, Annabelle? What's the plan? Sorry, Maggie, come on in.
Well, I'm just so excited because I think it's so wonderful that God has used you, Annabelle. You have these skills because of the job that you are doing, because I know quite a lot about the job you're doing from a different angle. And you have used those skills for God's work. And well done you. I mean, brilliantly. I love it. This in-depth, logical approach, which obviously is wonderful because people wouldn't be using it, would they? Well done you. It's lovely. Thank you. I'm going to have a go too.
Thank you, Maggie. That's really encouraging.
I think, am I right that there's a plan that we could go into some breakout rooms?
Yeah.
And Annabelle, you've pre-set some questions that could help
Yeah.
stimulate the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, feel free to ignore the questions if you want to talk about other things. But the questions which I thought that you might like to chat about is how engaged do you think members of your church are in caring for creation in their own lives? Is this something where the congregation is leading and that the church centrally is a little bit slow to catch up, or is it the other way around like we had at St. Paul's? The second question is, do you think the creation care scheme might be useful for your church, encouraging members to take action, and how might you use it at your church? And then the final question is maybe a little bit more abstract, but have you experienced God multiplying your loaves and fishes in ways you didn't expect in your work as creation care champion? So feel free to talk about any or none of those questions. I think Rosie's going to pop them in the chat.
How do your conversations go, friends? Well, there's lots of nodding going on. So what about the first question? And anybody want to address that or come up with something in regard to that first question?
Sorry, what was the first question?
That was engaged church members. Yeah, we sort of boiled down 3 points, if you like. Now I'm sort of slightly nervous about the last one, so I'll talk really slowly, so I'll time out and don't get to it. We thought it might be an incentive to because one of our members said that they knew of a church who procrastinated and hadn't got round to it, and when they eventually did, they have found some amazingly quick wins, and they were quite excited by it and said, "Gosh, I wish we'd done this earlier." And so we suggest that people are encouraged to do the easy bits first in order to make some quick wins and incentivize themselves to move on with it as an approach. Secondly, if I can read my writing, we saw that there were the Olympic style bronze, silver, gold steps that rewarded achievement, and we wondered about the fact that people who live in different kind of houses, we're talking about houses, not churches in this case, because we took this to mean engaged church people, but in their own domestic dwellings. And we thought that there was something to be said about, I mean, whilst it's wonderful to attain gold, and it's slightly less wonderful to attain silver, the people who attained gold might have had an easier path. And so we wondered if that was worth exploring, the fact that what sort of a percentage you've moved through your own work rather than the final outcome. And finally, and this is the one I'm slightly nervous of, and to exonerate everybody else on our breakout, it was my suggestion. We wondered about it as a use for teaching younger generations confidence, so that to give kids and younger people more confidence through their knowledge and understanding, and for them to sort of drag us older people with them because of their probably greater understanding of tech in one instance, and current approaches to this area generally as well. Does that make sense?
I think youngsters have a lot to give us, don't they? They're very helpful because they are interested and concerned.
Thank you. And as that, I thought that was, here's a gift for them to gain confidence through some sort of positive action that they could see results from. That's it. Those were our findings.
Great. We had a really interesting discussion in our group and kind of recognized the importance of measurement, as it were, and actually kind of checking yourself against something, leading to actual action. And actual action in this case being emission reduction, CO2 reduction. It's realistically the single biggest thing that we can do. And obviously we can task our governments with doing that. But actually, if we 7 billion, can't remember what number we're at the moment, actually had the ability to reduce our CO2 emissions, that's the net zero bit. So what measurement is there within creation care that actually challenges and shoves the whole, are you reducing your CO2 footprint?
Sorry, is that a question for me, Ben?
Go on, let's have a question then. Let's turn it. Yes, a question for you.
I guess it comes into lots of bits because we know that our CO2 is about how we heat our house, it's about how we move about, it's about what we eat. So I think there isn't one question that would capture that. I think it's across the different areas. So yeah.
Could there be room for something like what did you calculate your CO2 emissions to be last year, and what are they? Could there be or is that less helpful in your mind?
I'm just trying to remember. Sorry, there's so many questions.
This is where you go, yes, Ben, it's question 9. And you
this is where I'm looking for. We set a target for reducing the carbon footprint of our home. That's one of the questions in the home thing, and that's just about the home. I don't have a question, have you met last year's target? Maybe I should do.
Just a thought. David, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, one of the standards for organizations suggests that an organization, and okay, maybe this applies to individuals, maybe it doesn't. An organization should reduce its starting carbon footprint by 90% and only offset the remaining 10%. Now, that may not be applicable, and I thought the point made by Andy earlier that some people have an easier journey than others, I think is a really pertinent point, which makes it quite difficult to use precise numbers to measure significant progress. But nonetheless, this point about this blunt instrument suggesting a 90% improvement really forces you to think about whether or not you're worthy in, I deliberately slightly provocative and inappropriately so, whether or not you deserve a gold halo for what you've done with your carbon footprint if you haven't actually made a radical change to your carbon footprint.
Yeah, I mean it's worth noting.
So lots of what we do will cause carbon footprint reductions just by our awareness, reducing our flights, whatever. All those things are great, but how, as Westerners with huge carbon footprints,
Yeah.
how gold are we if we
Yeah.
don't make those radical changes?
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question. It's worth noting that most white Western communities, cultures, when we talk about our carbon footprint, or I say my carbon footprint is actually mine plus about 3 or 4 African households' carbon footprints. I'm spending their carbon footprint or their theoretical allowance by the way that I live. Now, how do we feel about it?
For me, all the more panicked because we're supposed to be at the vanguard, and yet we're still probably living like you're saying.
And it's really tough choices. It really is. And this is not, I'm not seeking in the next 7 minutes to end our evening back where we started, where we said, do not worry. But within that, we also have conscience and we also have reality. And we are trying to live this messy thing called life. And it's just as messy when it's a life of faith. And anyone who said that you get a free meal ticket when you become a Christian, that was just a 1980s lie that rolled around for a while. But actually, it's messy and it's hard and it's costly. It's always been costly. It was costly for Jesus. It's costly for us now. But we still are called into action to make wise and good decisions that are about the whole flourishing of humanity and creation along with it. Any more observations that we want to bring into the room, bearing in mind we've got about 5 minutes left and we ought to have some notices, otherwise we're not a proper meeting.
You know, we're talking about all this, and is all of it absolutely true and absolutely correct? But I don't think that our churches, I don't think that the ordinary people in the pew really give a lot of thought to it. So, yes, there's something very important about what we're saying, but I just don't see it in the parishes.
Yeah, okay, and that's kind of, I guess, why we find ourselves coming together for this network is probably slightly hesitantly to say, oh, okay, I will try and speak to this. I will try and communicate this with others. I will try and be more than just me. And you guys are extraordinary because of that. And I thank you for what you do each and every week in, week out. Maggie.
Well, Ben, I think that, to be honest, we are likely to be spreading the word much more by trying to get our congregations to fill this in than doing the one for the church. I mean, in a way, we've started it by doing the church and trying to get people to change their ideas of what we're doing in church and the electricity and all the rest of the things. But this is, let's think about ourselves. And so anything, surely, that actually helps people to think more is going to be a good thing. So I'm certainly going to actually, with people who don't use computers, which certainly half of the people in our church don't, I'm very happy to sit with them and just challenge them and say, well, what do you think about this? Because that's the way we get people thinking. And I mean, I can't see that it has to be a better way than doing nothing, whatever. That's what I would say over this, is getting us all to do our own inward thinking about creation care.
Thank you. Thank you. Friends, I'm gonna kind of pause our conversation there, but I'm going to say a huge thank you to Annabelle, because just thank you for introducing that to us, and for all the time and effort you've put in. And I deeply recognize and respect when you talk about giving your loaves and fish and that God multiplies them, but you gave your loaves and fish in the first place, and that's sometimes hard to do, so thank you. There are probably a whole raft of notices, Rosie, but they will come out in the news sheet, so you will get all of them within the next week.
That's right, and there were some which came out in last week's email as well. Just a reminder that we got the big World Fair on Saturday the 20th of April in the Cathedral. Do come and see us, or if you want to come on the stand with us, let me know. I can get you a pasty if you want for lunch. It's Christian Aid Week coming up on the 12th to the 18th of May. I had a look on their website and there's some really good resources there which you can download, and you might be able to still order some resources. Ben, I don't know if you want to say a bit about the Hazelnut Community Farm in Bristol and how they're launching an actual network. Quickly.
It will come out in the newsletter, but you may have heard of this organisation, you may not. Hazelnut Community Farm is effectively a church congregation that grew out of a garden farming project in inner city Bristol. It's extraordinary. It's got various denomination fingerprints across it. Thank you, Rosie, that's super helpful. But they are going to do a series, I think it's 4 dates they've got coming up, because they recognise that they want to spill out beyond just their network, and they want to draw in others to look at how church can be really quite radically different, but how it can also produce things that serve the community. So there are these sessions coming up. This will be included in the news sheet. And if you're thinking about a different sort of church or a different way of engaging people into faith community, it's a really remarkable and exhilarating model. And if you're ever in Bristol, give them a shout. It's an incredible thing to go and visit.
Brilliant. Just a reminder about the energy footprint tool, folks. We've only got 10% completion rate at the moment. We need to get to 80.
When's it got to be in for?
31st of July.
We've got a bit of time.
Yeah, we've got a bit of time. I've got faith in everybody. I think we'll get there. So the link for the portal will be on the news sheet, and also a link to the form so you can see the questions. The Environment and General Election Guide, that will be included in the newsletter, which we mentioned earlier. And it's only 2 pages, but it's got lots of really good advice, very simple but helpful advice. And finally, we spoke a while ago about Hope for the Future workshops. That helps with your campaigning, election campaigning. I know Annabelle recommended these workshops. They were held at a previous election. And so there's a workshop on the 16th of April. So that's next Tuesday at 12 o'clock. So it's gone out in the newsletters, but if you haven't got that link and you want it, just email me. I'll send it to you on Monday.
Amazing. Rosie, thank you.
Right.
Conscious of the time, I'm going to pray for us and then release you to your evenings. But let's just pray together. Heavenly Father, Creator God, you who gave Jesus to us as gift, and Jesus who spoke, do not worry. Would you take the burdens of our troubled minds? Would you hear the cries of our concerns for your extraordinary world where this place our home? And would you help us to be people who make a difference, who speak up for your creation, who recognize that what we do impacts others, and that we want to see a world restored, reflourishing, healed, and able to be sustainable for years to come. We offer you our loaves and our fish. Some of our loaves might feel a bit battered, possibly even stale. Our fish might be not looking as good as it once did, but we offer them to you and ask you to do what only you can, which is to multiply them, to restore them, to make extraordinary goodness come from them, to feed the hungry, to restore broken earth, to clean the air, to refresh the waters. That's what you do because you're God, and it's you whom we trust. Would you bless us as we go out this evening back to our families? Would you grant us your peace? Would you encourage us as we take action? Amen. Friends, thank you for coming and spending a Thursday evening with us. As ever, it is the highlight of my month. This is why I do what I do. I love hanging out with you. Thank you. And really look forward to seeing you possibly in person at the Big World Fair a week Saturday at Truro Cathedral. I'll be there. I know Julia's going to be there. A few others will be there. And if not, we'll connect across Tinternet or in person at some future date. But every blessing and huge thanks, Annabelle. Thank you all.